One of the things that is maybe not as unique to Tennessee is it is any hard state, right? Like a hard right state like Tennessee is. And we know like California, New York, Illinois, those are hard left states. One of the things that's so interesting, and this is something I haven't thought about really until the past few years, when you hear terms like voter suppression, super majority, all of these terms, and we've heard them our entire life. But I think depending on if you're a 40-something-year-old white guy like I am, and you've been kind of just going through life and kind of paying attention, but not really digging down deep into it, you may or may not know exactly number one what those things are, and then number two why those things aren't good things. Now, when you say the word voter suppression, we understand immediately why that's not a good thing. But when you hear supermajority, you're thinking, well, most of the people of this state are of like mind. Most of the people of this state want this particular party to represent them. Like I hear about people in California, I'm like, well, I guess they all want these drug tents set up with people shooting up drugs and heroin in the streets and all of the things that happen there. But when you really look at it, it's much, much different than that. And where you and I live in District 73 in the state of Tennessee, we have a very heated, contentious race between two Republicans. Now, one of them calls the other a rhino, even though the one Republican has been part of the largest group of Republicans in the history of our area, and is, many people think, look, turned our area this deep shade of red that it is now. But what are some of your thoughts about the District 73 race here in Tennessee for state rep specifically, but then also this idea of super majorities? Do you think that that's the majority of people in this state feel that this party best represents them? Is it a good thing to you?
Man, there's a lot in all of that. And as you were talking, I was thinking, all right, well, this is the angle I want to take this. And then you said something else, and I was like, no, wait, I want to take it in this angle. There are a couple things. One, I think you have a super majority in Tennessee. Obviously, we do. And anytime you have a super majority, hubris at that point takes over with whatever party is that super majority. People or Republicans around here always say, well, the Democrats had the supermajority in the 70s in Tennessee, and they did it then, so we're going to do it now. I've heard that several times. When they had the supermajority, they did whatever they want. And now what we're seeing is because of this supermajority, I think we end up having these really contentious races between two candidates who supposedly are under the same party umbrella, but are very different candidates, even though they are both running as a Republican. Does that make sense? Because what I
Yeah.
think what the supermajority's done is it's allowed these very extreme politicians to, one, get a foothold in office. And once they've gotten that foothold in office, they have the ability to do whatever the hell they want because of that supermajority. Because there's no consequence for them to present a lot of these people's, I'm going to use the word extreme, these extreme bills and get them passed, right? Where they run the risk is almost being, I'm going to use the word conservative, but you're going to push back on that because you always say like what Tennessee Republicans are right now doesn't represent conservatism. It's
Yeah.
overreach in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, conservatism is you're fiscally conservative and you believe in a less the less involvement by the government into your life, the better, right? Limited government and fiscal conservativity, like that used to be the building blocks that the party was on, and now you see it in states like Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. You see this bastardization. I call them drag queen Republicans. These people, profess so much to be so conservative and so Republican, and then they pass legislation that increases the scope and power of government, limiting your choices as an American. Like that's the opposite of conservatism. It's just they would die if they heard you say that.
Yeah, and it's allowed them to present these bills that I don't think ever would have been presented if there wasn't a supermajority. If you had more balance in the House and in the Senate, there would be a lot more accountability to moderation, so to speak. Like whatever bills are presented would look a lot more moderate than the versions that are being presented now, because you can throw some crazy shit out there. Chemtrails, for example, in this latest session, based on a conspiracy theory, and it passes, right? Like this shit's crazy. So when these things happen, they happen because there's a supermajority. Before we started recording, I was looking at some old, because we want to really focus on this District 73 House race between Jimmy Harris and Chris Todd. So I was going back through and look at some of the bills that Chris Todd sponsored, and I found a Jackson Sun article from 2019. All right, Todd had been in the House maybe a year at that point, and this is when the school voucher conversation was being started, right? And his quotes on that look so different than the way he presents himself now, 5 years later, right? Because in 2019, we might have had that supermajority, but they weren't feeling themselves the way they are now. I don't think they realized how much power they had. And once they realized how much power they had, that's when all the shit got crazy up there, right? Then you got your drag queen bills that he sponsored, that Todd sponsored. Like he was sort of the leading force behind that. Like that made him famous.
He wasn't sort of the leading force. No matter where you're watching this in the country, every single piece of legislation that outlawed and banned cabaret-style performances in public parks started in Jackson, Tennessee, because of extreme overreach by one party. Now, here's the deal. No one was saying at Fisherdale Marina, which is about an hour from where you and I live, every single year on the 4th of July, in public, on a dock, they have a wet bikini contest. I've watched videos of it before. It's extremely sexualized. Baby oil being shot on these ladies, these young ladies in these scantily clad bikinis, while they're twerking to Meg Thee Stallion songs on the dock as boats full of kids and stuff are passing by. Nobody talks about that. Now, a G-rated drag show, we assume that gay people only have sex all the time. That's all gay men are doing, is just having sex constantly because they're men and they just want to have sex, and they'll have sex with anything because they're men. So everything they do is just sexualized all the time. Everything's sexualized. But in every single town, just like in Jackson, Tennessee, in every single town, whatever town you're in right now, you have a decency law. You can't take your pants off in public, gay or straight, white or black, rich or poor. You can't, right? And so there are these decency laws. And so true conservatives, people that lean on the right before we went crazy, they say, wait a minute, we don't need a redundancy of laws. This can't be sexually explicit, period, in a park. It just can't be. Because it can't be heterosexually sexually explicit either. Like, these laws already exist. They can be applied to any sex. So it was targeted, it was specific, and it was from the thought that every gay person wants to make your child gay and then molest your child. Every single one of them. It was based in such ignorance. And that's the part that frustrates me as a conservative. I'm like, look, we have these things in place. We have these things in place already that protect straight people or gay people from doing overtly sexual acts in public. This is not that. This is a freak out to not make us pay attention to when they, like in Tennessee, vote on bills to hide our tourism tax dollars from us so they can recruit the Super Bowl.
That's not a tenet of conservatism, is it?
No, not at all. That's why I, not so lovingly, but very correctly, call these people drag queen conservatives. They profess all the time how conservative they are. I'm very conservative. I'm very, very conservative. A matter of fact, hell, I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution. Woo. And then they do the exact opposite of that. So it's almost like someone wearing a dress pretending to be a woman, but if you were to lift that skirt up, there is a surprise there. I'm telling you, the surprise is these people are the opposite of conservatives. They just profess to be. It's almost like this, Gabe. You spent a lot of time in the church. This will blow a lot of people's minds that know you. You spent a lot of time in the church when you were young. Did you ever meet anybody who were just, they were like, I'm so Christian. So Christian. So Christian. Do business with me. I'm a super Christian. And they just say it over and over and over. Usually those were like the shadiest people in the world, right? Because they were trying to trick you into believing how Christian they were. And you would be like, as a Christian, you would say, Well, man, I'll just judge you by your actions. You don't have to like profess it all the time. We'll, judge you by your works. It seems like I remember that at one of the few times I went to church, right? It seems like that's in there. And it's the same way with being a conservative. Like, you don't have to tell me all the time. I can just see your voting record. I can see what you stand for. It should be the same way.
Well, there's a line from a Shakespeare play, and I can't remember what the play is. It's very famous. I'm sure you've heard it. Thou doth protest too much, right? So if you are constantly having to say that you are X, Y, or Z, more than likely you are not X, Y, or Z. If I were to look at the way that these constitutionalists or conservatives view themselves, if I had a circle, right, they would picture themselves being as far opposite as some of the fundamental Islamic religions that they deem horrific. Okay, because that is also sort of a thing they categorically lump under one umbrella, right? Like these different religions that aren't evangelical or Christian, there's automatically a side eye turn to some of these Eastern religions. We can all collectively understand that a lot of the fundamental, regardless of whether it's Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever, the further away you get from sort of a central idea of what that religion was, and the more you get into the extreme fundamentals of that religion, the worse it ends up being for everybody that's involved in it, right? We all know how fundamental Islam treats women. We know that, right? That's common knowledge. I would argue that if you were to look at the circle of these very extreme conservatives and these very extreme militant Islamic religious leaders, they're on different sides of the circle, but they're all about to touch at the top, right? They're not that different, but they're going to say they are the complete opposite of those people, and they're really not.
It's a fair point, especially when you're talking about women's rights. And when I say women's rights, I'm not talking about abortion, right? Like pro-life, pro-choice. I'm talking about women's rights to, work, could talk to a man outside of the home. I mean, just any of that, shop, just any of that kind of stuff that is, yes, there are differences like the stonings and stuff like that. Like that's pretty intense in those extremely fundamental Eastern religions in Islam and stuff. But yes, to your point, when you're talking about just, hey, it's an equal thing. Women can decide for themselves. We talked a week or so ago about Harrison Butker and the whole, like, women, your job should be to want to raise the family. Well, no, your job should be to follow your dream, whatever it looks like. And that's for boys and girls. That's for both. That's for everybody sitting there. That should be what we want for everyone.
It's more of the mentality of, and not necessarily the way they treat women, although I think there could be an argument made for that, especially when it does come to women's health care and abortion, which that's probably another topic for another show down the road. But it's more the idea that we think these things are wrong. So we're not going to allow anyone to do it just because we believe it's wrong. That is the problem with this. That is why this supermajority in Tennessee feels so militant, because they are. It's this idea of, if we believe this is right, if we believe this is okay and this is true, if this is constitutional, this small extreme group of Republicans believe that, well, we got the votes to make these things, these ideas, into laws now. Now they cease to exist being ideas or opinions. Well, now they're laws. And bringing it back to this District 73 race, I think this race is so telling of where the Republican Party is right now. You could say in a regional level in the South, but I would argue it's at the national level right now, even with this presidential election coming up, because you've got your people who have been traditional Republicans for a long time, and they're not okay with who the Republicans have nominated for president. They're not okay with his character. They're not okay with even a lot of maybe some of his policy from the first 4 years. And they've been consistent. They didn't like him in 2016. They don't like him in 2024. But they still consider themselves Republicans, right? And so
yes.
you have this dividing line between whoever these traditional Republicans were and now whoever these I don't know what would you call a Trump disciple? Because I do believe there are zealots who are following Trump now who maybe didn't pay that much attention to politics before 2015.
And that's some of his magic. He was able to grab people, much like Jack Abramoff, Tom DeLay, all of these people, Newt Gingrich, our friend Bob Ney, much like they did in the late 80s, early 90s, with this college movement, this young Republican college movement, grabbed up large swaths of Christians, right, and turned them political. Donald Trump, to his credit, some would say, oh, no, no, no. But I mean, he's the only human being that could do this. People who didn't really care that much about politics, and probably, if you were to look at their voting records, weren't that active voting, are now completely sold out to him. Now, I watched an interview on Bill Maher with Ken Buck was on this past week on Bill Maher. And Ken Buck, not a Trump fan, been very critical of him, endorsed Nikki Haley in the Colorado primary, said, look, I don't love Trump. I'm still voting for him because my other choice is Joe Biden. And he lists all the long things. I mean, Joe Biden, when we talk about Trump being a different Republican, Joe Biden has lost many progressives with what's going on in Gaza. Many young voters, many progressive, many Jewish people who said, look, this is only going to make our existence harder in the state of Israel. So, I mean, neither one of the national candidates are perfect. But I'll say this. If you look at our house in Washington, D.C., and then our house in Nashville, Tennessee, the one thing I know, because I've talked to people who've been in Congress, who still talk to people who are in Congress, they're like, look, we hate this. We hate this Freedom Caucus. They don't want to govern. They literally want to be in the minority because then they can just bitch and say, well, these damn Democrats, they don't have to pass any legislation. They can still have the same power, influence, raise the money through the PACs and the lobbying groups and all that, but not have to worry about the legislation. Every time something goes wrong, they can just point at it and say, well, they have the majority. I've had Republicans reach out to me that are in the state house and the state senate. They have sent me emails. They have talked to me at gatherings. And they have told me, they said, look, I know you have been very critical of our current representation because of some legislation in District 73. I want you to know that even though I would never say this out loud, I agree with you. We don't like this loud form of republicanism, this refusal to ever go across the aisle, that being the biggest sin, but they're scared. And they didn't say the words, I'm scared. I read your article and I learned what scared was. They said, you can't speak out against them because right now you will be shouted down on the floor, in the chambers, and then you will be money whipped with these PACs, these 501c4s coming into the state of Tennessee. You'll be primaried and you'll be money whipped. We have opened the doors in our state and in our country for these groups. The reason in 2019, Todd wasn't talking this much about vouchers, and the reason he is in 2024, $3 million came in from these super PACs, from Betsy DeVos, from the Walton family, from this PAC money, this dark money came in. AFP, which I love Michael Lotfy, and you like Trey Cleek.
I don't like
AFP. AFP has, thrown their weight behind these vouchers. There are a handful of organizations out there who stand to make a shit ton of money off the Tennessee taxpayer. The same way they did in Arizona, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire. So if you were to ask me, what's the difference between 2019 and 2024? CASH.
Yep. And they're about to bankrupt Arizona. I mean,
100%.
Yes.
And they'll bankrupt Tennessee.
Yeah. I'm still not convinced it's going to pass. I thought it was a shoe-in. Again, this is not a voucher conversation, but I thought it was a shoe-in this time. I was pleasantly surprised when it wasn't. I think it's going to be more of a struggle next year. I do. I don't think it's going to be. I know they're going to keep pushing and pushing on it, and this is this can bring us back to this topic of conversation again, because before we started recording, you mentioned that you saw where Governor Bill Lee was going to be attending
speaking at a fundraiser. I don't think they call them rallies, although that may be apt too. A fundraiser for Scott Sapicki in whatever county, I forget, Maury County, I believe. Is it Maury County or Sumner County? Sumner County, one of the two counties.
Lee is handpicking his people now. He even said, like, he is putting his hand in these races because he needs to make sure people are on board who will vote for his voucher thing, because he looks like a damn fool after this session. like he has been made to look. While he had been doing everything, even though I didn't agree with a lot of it, he
Yeah.
had been doing everything almost perfectly since he had taken, since he became governor. I mean, like Blue Oval City announcement, like Tennessee's bringing industry to the state. Like everything was in lockstep with what he wanted to do. But then all of a sudden, the shit happened at Covenant. He calls a special session for red flags. Both the House and the Senate just do that to him, right? The Senate
Well,
actually just the
the
Senate
Senate
just
said we're
decided.
going home. Yeah, they said we're just going
Right, we're
home.
not doing this. The House was like, okay, here's what we'll do. Here are the laws we'll do at the special session. We won't do the red flag. No. Instead, let's just arm teachers, right? Instead, Representative Todd says, hey, if those kids weren't killed at Covenant, maybe a car would have run over them if they didn't get shot. Literally said that in the special session.
Rocks.
So,
People love saying
yeah.
rocks. Rocks would a rock killed Abel, or
So,
Cain. I mean,
okay. God. So, it killed Abel. Come on, brush up on
oh
your.
yeah, you're right. You're right. It did. Cain killed him.
Yes.
I said it right the first time. I got very nervous. I had to think back to Sons of Anarchy. All right, go ahead.
And not Glenn Jacobs, the real Cain, not the wrestler. So all of this being said, Bill Lee seems desperate right now to me. As somebody who I honestly thought would be like a moderate Republican when he was elected, simply because he really had no political history and he didn't present himself the way a lot of these extreme Republicans are presenting themselves. Your Chris Todds, your Donald Trumps, your Marjorie Taylor Greens, your Marsha Blackburns, right? Like these super extreme. It's like you could just engineer an AI conservative bot and they would just spit out all the things that these people are saying all the time, right? Like your Chris Todd, your Marjorie Taylor Greens, Donald Trumps, all of those. Lee didn't seem like that. And now he saw the House and the Senate say, fuck you to your special session. He rolled out this school voucher stuff with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and that thing just fell flat, even with the millions of dollars pumped in by AFP. They were like, no, we don't want to do this. He looks like he is weak when he's been very strong for his first 5 years.
I'll tell you, I think it's a couple of things when you're talking about a governor like Bill Lee. I do think the money coming in is a real thing, right? I think that when you are a governor and you're looking at privatization dollars, we know another $3 million was spent by Core Civic, which is our private prison industry we have here in the state of Tennessee, who fails every single audit they do, every single time. Huge fail, huge fail. What did they do with the taxpayer money? They reinvest it back into Nashville to tune about $3 million in 4 or 5 years, if I remember right, maybe in 6. And so everybody's like, all right, let's just give them some more time. I'm sure they'll get it right. I think that's some of it. But I think this too. Bill Lee is on a short list of Republican governors. Ron DeSantis, he's taken himself out of it now, right? He performed very odd when he ran for president. But Ron DeSantis, Bill Lee, maybe another governor. These were people that the Republican Party, that when I would talk to people, they'd say, this guy could maybe be president. This guy could maybe be. And so I think what he is doing, and this is what good politicians do, like it or not, this is what good politicians do. They take the temperature of the room. And he's like, look, Doug Burgum may be a good guy, maybe a good governor. He ain't getting any damn votes in a presidential primary. Asa Hutchinson, who was governor of Arkansas, pretty good guy. People I respect who know Asa, Bob Ney being one of them. Bob Ney said he'd be a fantastic president. Asa just talked about different ways to help the country. He didn't have enough sex appeal. You got to be able to have some razzle dazzle. You got to be able to sell this culture war stuff that very rarely affects my life and your life, right, but is a national narrative topic. And I think that's one of the reasons, besides the cash, that Bill Lee made some of these moves.
It's interesting to me too, again, because I think this District 73 race is a microcosm of what's playing out across the state and across the country, where you have sort of this traditional Republican who has sort of done the work already. So Jimmy Harris was mayor of Madison County for I'm not sure how many years, almost a decade, maybe longer. Mm-hmm. Right? He's done the work. He's gotten elected. He's been part of the traditional Republican regime around here for a long time.
A
Right?
lot of people
Has
called he and his former business partner the kingmakers of the Republican Party when they first got political here in this area. We were as blue as can be. A lot of the changing of the minds, and as we saw the shift from blue to red across Tennessee, but especially in our area, a lot of people credit people like Jimmy Wallace, who's business partners with Jimmy Harris. I've never heard Jimmy Harris's name associated in that king-making way with Jimmy Wallace, but one would think since they were business partners, they at least sat in the same room. You know, they really converted this area. Stephen Fincher, who ran for U.S. Congressman for John Tanner's seat, the farmer from Frog Jump. That's where I grew up in Crockett County. Stephen Fincher. At the time, it was the more money was spent on that congressional seat than ever in the history of the United States on that congressional seat, flipping it from John Tanner to Stephen Fincher.
Well, you talk about
And
outside money too, because that man didn't have a damn clue what was going on. It's like he just got his notes before he went out there, and they're like, "Say this, this, and this. We'll take care of the rest."
And Jimmy Wallace was very instrumental in Stephen Fincher having success. And again, I had never heard Jimmy Harris's name attached to that other than them just being business partners. But you got to think he was probably at least there. You know what I mean? He was, learning from that. And so this whole deal now where Chris Todd and these Chris Todd backers, and many of them, like Trump back, are very new to politics. They don't know historically what happened. They don't even know a lot of history, period. So they are saying, well, Jimmy Harris is a rhino. They don't know historically the moves that Jimmy Wallace, and again, I hate to even lump him in there because I never heard his name growing up in that way, but at least being around those people and those people's orb, they don't know about the conversion that took over, yet they're very comfortable calling him a rhino.
Very, very comfortable. And I don't know, and I know you disagree on the way that COVID was handled here in the county, but I think that's the first time I ever saw, I guess, Mayor Harris govern, for lack of a better word, because the county mayor doesn't really do a lot of that.
You don't do a lot. You're a PR person. You're, ambassador. Yeah.
But even Mayor Harris, when he was mayor, he wasn't out there, right? Like he wasn't putting himself out there. He wasn't ever combative. It's like he just did his job and he went home. As far as I can remember. I don't remember there being a lot of like issues coming up. I can remember when I would write opinion columns for the Jackson Sun here, I was looking for something because the sheriff's department would always ask for more money every year. Like, remember John Mayer would come in and he'd be like, I want $5 more million and blah, 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 blah. It was crazy, like every year. And everybody was just getting pissed off. They were tired of it. And I was writing an article on that. And I kind of went back through some old articles and I saw some quotes from Mayor Harris where I thought, that's interesting. That sort of goes against this new loud version of republicanism that sort of took hold in 2016 or so. And he was talking about the recidivism rate in Madison County. And he said, we've got to do something to help these people who get out of jail not to come back into jail. It wasn't the typical verbiage that you would hear from law and order Republicans in Tennessee that we're hearing now. It's like, how do we help these people get jobs? How do we help them become productive members of our county and our city? What are some things that other counties are doing? I remember he was being proactive in that because, look, we can't keep spending a bunch of money, which is a conservative tenet, right? Like we don't want to keep spending a bunch of money on building a bigger jail. So let's do some things. Let's provide some services for people that when they leave jail, they won't end up coming back. When I read that, when he said that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe this guy's not, maybe I've painted him with the wrong kind of brush that I typically paint conservative with. So maybe that was my fault. And then when COVID happened and the way he and Mayor Conger, our city mayor, worked together, I thought, okay, this guy's just trying to do what he thinks is best with the amount of information he's been given at this time. He's not sort of like towing a political line. But let's remember, even our most conservative leaders, Bill Lee being one, Donald Trump being one, everybody kind of shut shit down for a few weeks, COVID. Everybody did. So when he did that, I was like, okay, maybe he is a little bit more, I don't want to use the word moderate, but maybe he's not as extreme as I thought he was. Where on the other side, you have Crhs Todd, who seems to get off on being combative, right? Whether it's with parents, whether if it's with other House representatives, whether it's with a state trooper who was sent by Governor Lee to say, hey, lowering the carry age to 18 isn't a good idea. Allowing people to carry AR-15s openly isn't a good idea. And
If we really back the blue, we got to do more than put a blue light bulb in our front porch light. We actually have to, assume that they know about their job.
Right. And this is the same fucking guy that also said to a group of super conservative people, he said, I know I'm your representative, but if every one of you in this room told me to vote in a way that would even put a dent in what the Second Amendment says, I'm not your guy. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So he has a long list of, frankly, just being an asshole.
He has made more mistakes from what I will call, in my opinion, I think it started in a good place. I interviewed him on the radio show that I do right after the Covenant shooting, which is a horrible shooting we had in Nashville a few weeks after. And I just got back from vacation. I remember you and I talked. I was on vacation with my son when it happened. I'm just blown away, as everybody was. And I talked to him, and I looked him in the face, not to be like George Bush, Vladimir Putin here, but I looked him in the face, eye to eye. And I didn't see his soul, but I did see that he meant when I said, look, we got to do something, man. You and I, we'll go back and forth on some issues, but something has to happen. SROs are at a minimum. He said, completely agree with you. Got to do that. He then off air. Now, Crhs Todd does not need to clear one thing by me. So this isn't like I'm influential or non-influential in any of his decision making. But he said, maybe arming teachers and stuff. I was like, ooh. I said, I don't know about that. I said, what do they think? And he's like, well, we got to do something. I said, I like where you're going. I don't care what it looks like. It just needs to be something where we don't face this again. I really, truly believe, all kidding aside, that was coming from a good spot, the attempt to do something. I think where disconnect happens on any extreme movement, right or left, where the disconnect happens is in the next logical step. What we would call it in business, like our business plan, our planning phase. What could this look like? How do we go from here? How do we grow from here? This summer, when he proposed, and it didn't get out of committee, but it was a very close vote, when he proposed that you could take an 8-hour training class online, to carry any citizen, any teacher, any principal, any janitor, any human being over 18 to carry a gun on school property, football games, field trips. I don't know that was born with a bad spirit. I just don't think, because he is so sold out to doing something, to being right, to protecting his Second Amendment, he never thought, God forbid, what if there was a shooting at a school? A teacher has a gun out. They're looking for the shooter. 2 dads come who live close by the school. I used to live right next door to my son's school. I could be there in 30 seconds. 2 dads come, meaning well. A grandfather who doesn't even have kids in the school anymore, he comes there. Then the cops get there. 7 people with guns. The cop has to decide in a very high-pressure environment which one's good, which one's bad. And there's also kids there. They never played it out. And that's what extremists don't do. You and I both listened to an interview with the San Francisco mayor on Jon Stewart's show that he did on Apple TV. And she talked about the drug tents in San Francisco. And it was born from a good spot. Now, she said ultimately this was a mistake. It was born from a good spot. And I would contend to you that some of Crhs Todd and these others, some of their stuff, I do believe, is born from a good spot. But because they are such a sellout to their extreme version, and this has to be right because they're not looking for conversation, they're looking for full conversion. Just like the lady in San Francisco, she didn't think it out. Well, of course there's going to be more drug users on the street. Of course there's going to be all of this other fallout that we saw. But because she's like, I want to give people a safer, cleaner way to do this, she didn't think it all out. She thought the idea sounded good. And then we missed it. And I think it's the same thing with some of these people that we're seeing now. Do I think that every single Republican who voted for school vouchers being passed in the state of Tennessee, even though there's overwhelming evidence that 80% of students who receive them never spent one day in public education. Do I think that every single one of those Republicans who voted yes on it were bought and paid for by these PACs? Yes, I do. But I do think that some of them thought that they were born from a good spot too, like they were doing the right thing as well.
I think they can. I think when there's enough money in your hands, you can talk yourself into thinking a lot of things are right.
I sure as hell been there.
You know, so I think that's probably what happened. But here's the question, and this is what I want to bring this back to, because I think this is a philosophy that this is where these roads diverge. Is the job of an elected representative to represent his entire district, or his or her entire district? Or is his job to represent himself or herself and their beliefs? So here's what I mean.
It's a great question.
Chris Todd literally said he is going to vote this way, this way, this way, regardless of what his constituents want him to vote. Now, the argument on the other side is, well, hey, you voted for him, so you knew what he was running on. And my pushback on this is, no, you fucking didn't. Because in 2019, Chris Todd didn't have a goddamn clue about vouchers, right? But he does now, apparently. In 2019, this was pre-COVID, this was pre-covenant, this was pre-BLM. A lot of shit changes, okay? So what you've got to have is in my opinion, your representatives have to be open to listening to the constituents of their district, regardless if they're Republican, Democrat, or independent. Not to represent themselves. I'm talking about the constituents. Chris Todd is a District 73 rep. He's my rep. I don't like him. He didn't like me. He won't come on a radio show if I'm on there, okay? He still represents me. I'm still paying tax dollars, okay, on the sales tax to this county, to this state. He represents me. He should, no matter how much he doesn't like me, he should listen to my concerns about certain things. And not just me. I don't mean like Gabe Hart is the be-all, end-all. But people like me as well in this district. I point back to this all the time. The state senator in our district is Ed Jackson. I called up Ed or emailed him or texted him, whatever it was, about the third grade retention law. We sat at Green Frog in Jackson, Tennessee last summer for like an hour and a half and had a great conversation. Now, that joker still voted against what I wanted him to vote on, but at least he was open and at least he listened, okay? And at least he asked questions. And he admittedly, honestly, didn't understand a lot of it. And I'm afraid that's what ends up happening up there is a lot of these politicians don't understand the depth of the things that they're voting on. It is just steered by chairmen and chairwomen of committees. There's probably no chairwomen in committees in the Tennessee House,
here we go.
Chairmen of committees. So this is the way that this supermajority, to bring it all the way back to how we were starting, this is how they get and retain their power. It is the voices of a very few powerful people in the House and Senate that are dictating and guiding everybody else. And here we are.
And if you want to know some differences between, you talked about Senator Ed Jackson and then Representative Chris Todd, here's the thing. What's the right way to be? That's the question. I'm going to answer this way. Both. I think both are the right way. As long as when you are knocking on a door, you're being very upfront and honest. I'm asking for your vote. I'm a very hard right-wing Republican. Is probably about as hard as you can imagine. I'm going to represent very, very far Republican values. As long as you say that, and to Chris Todd's credit, I think that he does that a lot. The groups that he associates himself with, and that he never says, okay, look, guys, quit endorsing me because y'all put some cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on your pages and I don't want to be associated with that. I would say that if I was a politician. If there were some groups out there who literally put things that were easily proven to be false, I would say, hey, look, I can't have this association. I appreciate your support, but I can't have this association because this endorsement looks bad for my credibility. He does not do that. He says out loud, I'm going to vote for this. Then you have somebody like Jimmy Harris, who has been in politics for a while, who says, I want to represent all of Madison County, and insert whatever county you live in here, all of Madison County. I don't want to go to Nashville and then come back home and tell the people of Madison County about Nashville. I want to go from Madison County to Nashville and tell Nashville about Madison County. Those are two very different schools of thought there. Two different approaches. The onus and the responsibility becomes on the people who hire them, right? The people, and that's us. I do think that we get exactly what we deserve at every level of government, state, local, state, and federal. We get exactly what we deserve because voter turnout is so low, even with all of this bullshit money that is behind all of these people at multiple levels of government. Even with taking that into stand, you can find information out. You can find accurate information. There's enough media outlets doing legitimate, good work, like where we live, Tennessee Lookout. They do phenomenal work, right? They literally just report it. Here's what happened. Easy to do. I would imagine most every state has something similar. Now, they may not be as known as like our statewide publication, the Tennessean, but you can find it just doing a little work. You have to be able to suss this out at some point. Otherwise, why do they keep talking about drag shows and book bans and not having satanic people, teach at your school? Just all of these things that are either non-existent, or if they are existent, they're such a small percentage of they. Chances are, if nothing ever happened, if they went unchecked forever, it would never affect you. But when huge things happen to all of us as Tennesseans, as Americans, they do that because it's sexy, because it's culture war stuff, because it gets people to the polls. You don't have to pass an IQ test to vote. And it's unfortunate.
Say you should.
Yeah, I agree.
You probably should. Chuck, what did you say last year? That you don't think everybody should be able to vote? Something like that?
No, I don't.
What was it? What was the word?
No, I don't think everybody should be able to vote. You have to pass a test to drive a car. You have to, there are all kinds of things in life that you have to be certified for. You have to prove an aptitude. You can't drive a car without a license because you not knowing how to drive that car could negatively affect me or my family on the road. But your dumbass can certainly vote without passing any kind of test, and that affects me and my family too, right? Do you see? That's always been my point. I know that's never going to happen, but if we really looked at this the right way, that's how we would look at it. Most people couldn't pass a civics test. All right, I'm going to take this to District 73. And this is no harm on Chris Todd. I feel as if I've done a great job defending him tonight. The man who literally, you as well, the man who literally is endorsed by Madison County Constitutional Republican Party. Okay. It's like the fourth or fifth iteration of Republicanism we have in a town with 100,000 people in our county. The man endorsed by the MCCR, Chris Todd, constitutionalist is in their name, right? He voted to hide his vote, one of 69 people in the House of Tennessee. Here's how I found this information out on TennesseeConservativeNews.com. They had the story a couple of months ago. He voted to hide tourism dollars for a period of 10 years from Tennessee taxpayers so they could recruit. The state of Tennessee could recruit the NFL to have a Super Bowl here. And I think the Super Bowl is booked till 2029, but we got to build a stadium and stuff too, right? So after 2029, all truth be told, I don't care if it costs $50 million. I think it would be a huge win for the state of Tennessee, right? You would make that back, then some. As a conservative, as someone who believes in the Constitution and someone who is a conservative, I have a huge problem with that. None of them, when I have asked them those questions, I had a city council member who's a member of that group on my radio show, my talk show that I do every day. And I asked her about it because she brought up Chris Todd. She said, I'm definitely voting for him. Jimmy Harris is a rhino. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, do you know if Jimmy Harris, which I do have a problem with the handling of COVID, by the way, that's maybe a discussion for another day, but do you know about Representative Todd's vote on this to hide our. And she's like, I'm going to ask him about it. She texted him during the show. She never knew. She never let me know what he responded back. And I guess my problem with that is you don't really care. You don't really care. He sells you on culture war stuff. He sells you on drag queens. He sells you on arming teachers, more guns making. So whatever it is that stirs you up emotionally, that's the sales pitch. But it's not conservatism. It's not constitutional. It's actually the opposite of that. It is the opposite of that. And you see it play out over and over and over. That's not his fault. If I sell ice cubes to people and they keep coming up and buying ice, I'm not mad at me, but I'm like, hey, look, you don't need the ice cubes. You actually need water because you are dying of thirst right now. You need to buy. I'm not mad at the dude selling ice cubes. He's just making a living. Crhs Todd's just making a living. Until these people that are in these groups. Now, the leaders of these groups, they're trying to attach themselves to a bigger star to get that gravitational pull so they can one day have political sway and power. I mean, we all get how these things work. But I'm talking about the innocent people who are members of this, who don't do any research for themselves. Those are the ones that I feel really, really sorry for because you just got to look. And hell, they hide it on places called TennesseeConservativeNews.com. I mean, literally, you can just look there. You don't have to go to the Lookout. If you feel the Lookout maybe a little bit too left for you, go somewhere like that.
No, dog. Yeah, but listen, Tennessee Conservative News is God. They're so bad.
They had the story, my man. They had the story. They listed all 69 Republicans who voted for this bullshit. They listed. You got to read both. You got to read everything. I'm a big reader.
I appreciate them sometimes. It's just hard. They're hard for me to read. They're hard for me to read.
Well, you should expand.
Not because of their ideologies necessarily. More of their writing. That's what it is. But
there does seem to be a different flow at the Lookout. I will say that when Sam Stocker gets a hold of an article or Adam Freeman, it does have a different flow. I'll give you that. But let me ask you this. One other thing I want to talk about. One of the things that Jimmy Harris is being damned for is he would listen to Democrats. He would talk to Democrats. You're talking about Tennessee Conservative News. You don't like it. If you were in political office, would you listen to somebody that was a Republican? Like if I were in political office, I would definitely want to work with Democrats. I don't look at that as a bad thing. Now, I don't want to work with Democrats on putting up drug tents outside of every, government building. I don't want to do that. But when it comes to, hey, look, let's pass legislation that has multiple points of view on it because it's probably closer representative of all of Tennessee. I don't look at that as a detriment anymore. Would you? Like, I would not be afraid to work with someone across the aisle.
Like, we've got to get back to that. But here's the thing. That's so easy for us to say because we're not getting whatever salary House reps get.
I mean, it's not that much money. It's not that much money.
It can't be. Well, but then they get what they're getting paid for that job is probably not that much, but what they're getting paid by special interest groups and donors and shit like that, they don't want to give that up. And I can't blame them in a lot of ways for that. So it's easy for us to say, well, that's what we would do. I still think that's what I would do. I also think I know myself well enough to know that I'm not going to fuck around with a lot of bullshit. So, and it's one reason why, I've kept jobs for a while. It's one reason I didn't last very long in Haywood County. There's a certain line that I'm going to draw, I think. And so while it is easy for us to say what we would or wouldn't do, I think for them, they are so entrenched in whatever power they get from that position and probably whatever financial kickbacks they get from whatever special interest groups, that for them to go across the aisle is almost like political suicide at this point, which it shouldn't be at all.
And that's a shame.
Well, on certain issues, let me back up. On certain issues, right? These culture war issues, abortion, which I guess is a culture war issue, the LGBTQ stuff, the voucher, like all these people draw these hard lines in the sand on both sides, right? Like hell, as a liberal, I've been like taken to task by other liberals. If I just dared to even say on social media, like, hey, I don't think Donald Trump meant blah, blah, blah when he said blah, blah, blah. And people lost their shit over that. It's whenever he said to drink Drano or something about COVID.
Yeah,
Like, I don't really
bleach.
think
And we
he
looked
meant
into
that.
bleach, maybe swallowing it.
Bleach, right? And man, people who I would consider, I wouldn't say friends, but we think a lot alike in political terms. I might as well have, like, given the Heil Hitler sign or something. So,
But there is sold out too, right? There is sold out. Like all of a sudden, it doesn't become about principle. It becomes about position. And I think we see that on the right and on the left. Some of your friends, some of the posts that you have made, and when you and I did radio work together on a station in the summer, I picked up some liberal friends who sent me friend requests because of the work that we did. I will see them react to something, and they didn't read it past the headline. They don't like the author of it, right? And then they start flipping the hell out. I'm like, you're just as guilty as the people who are like, hey, Todd, you say you're so conservative. You voted to hide our tax dollars from. They're just as big of sellouts, right? They are not following a guiding principle. They're just part of a system, and I have a problem with that. Like that's too much, right? Like it doesn't make you a better Democrat, or it doesn't make you a better Republican. I would suggest that it makes you lesser of both when your mind's already made up.
And it's killing our country now. Like it is. Like you can't have a conversation. Like ideally, this would be the way to work stuff out.
Yeah.
Is to a verbal back and forth. Social media is killing it. Extreme politics are killing it. Like all of these things, we can't have any conversation anymore because we're so hell bent on being 100% right and the other side being 100% wrong. Like it's black and white. There's no gray. There's no meshing of ideas anymore. It doesn't seem to be, at least. We're coming up on almost an hour. So I do want to preview, I think, what I want to talk about next week.
Wonderful.
And it ties into this because I know we said at the beginning this District 73 race is sort of a microcosm of what's going on with the Republican Party. This primary election, like this Jimmy Harris, Crhs Todd, I don't know, is there a Democrat waiting on the other side of it?
No,
it doesn't matter.
There's not. This is the entire race. Okay. Whoever wins this primary
is the race.
Is the general.
The primary is the general. Tennessee is an open primary state, despite what a lot of people say. It is. I'm going to be voting in that primary, even though I am probably not a bona fide Republican or however the fuck you want to that.
This is what it says if you're in Tennessee and you go to vote in the primary, an open primary state, 100% of taxpayers, Tennessee taxpayers, fund primaries for Republicans and Democrats. They're not funded by the parties. My positioning on this would change immediately if the parties funded these primary elections, if they used their own money to pay for this instead of the taxpayers of Tennessee, right? It's kind of hard to say, hey, we're using your money, but you can't come. Like if the bank told me, congratulations on making your mortgage payment, but you still can't spend the night here. I'm like, what the hell, man? I'm paying for this, right? All right, here's what it says. I found this. It says, this is when you go to vote, guys. It's the law. Please read. I'm going to hold this up right here. This is what it says. This yellow placard, it's everywhere. It says, it's a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 2-7-115B and punishable as a crime under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 2-19-102 or Section 2-19-107 if a person votes in a political party's primary without being a bona fide member of or affiliated with that political party, or to declare allegiance to that party without the intent to affiliate with that party. That is what's put up at every single voter's precinct in Tennessee.
Clear as mud.
That we all pay for. We're an open primary state. Completely illegal, unenforceable, completely unenforceable. Completely.
Although Representative Todd, in a message to a constituent, did call me a felon because I voted in a Republican primary. Literally called me that.
Yeah, but
I've never
in
been arrested.
today's circles, but what the hell's a felon, right? I mean, that doesn't hell. That means you may have a better chance at winning.
Yes. Yes. Look, I think next week, we dive into this primary discussion because it's going to get heated in July when early voting starts with this. This is going to these primary elections, because we talked about dark money. There is also money coming in from outside of the state that is being used to recruit and promote moderate Republicans to run against Republicans like Todd,
Yeah,
Scott Sapicki, Jeremy Faison,
Cam
Jack
Sexton.
Johnson, right?
Does anybody
Yes.
ever run against Cam Sexton?
Lord, no, if they did, they're in a trunk somewhere at the bottom of a river. So yes, like there is money coming in from Republican groups outside of Tennessee because they're looking at Tennessee and they're like, holy shit, this is bad. Like we've got to run more moderate candidates against these whatever the fuck they want to be called, because even they know like this is going too far. So look, they're like all eyes are on Tennessee right now.
We are. I would say there are some Mississippi races that are interesting. Probably not as many as there are in Tennessee. And then Alabama. Alabama has told Tennessee to hold its beer when it comes to this in vitro fertilization stuff. I'm talking. I mean, we can all agree. You know, you and I probably have some disagreements on abortion. I tend to be pro-life, with the exception of rape, incest, and life of the mother. But when you have an egg that has been fertilized in a cooler, and the cooler goes out because of electrical failure, you can't be able to hold the clinic responsible criminally. I mean, we have to inject some common sense, and that's what's happening in states like Alabama. It's awful. But yes, Tennessee is an extreme state, but none of this happens without the people sending them there. Now, it is an uphill climb for someone who does go there for the right reasons, who does go there and wants to legislate instead of dictate. It is an uphill climb because the money does kind of come in certain ways in states like Tennessee, but it still doesn't make it impossible. And it doesn't make it impossible because the people just educate themselves.
Right. Well, and that's the problem. They don't. And I will say, man, voting in Tennessee can be challenging. Voting in Madison County can be challenging, and again, that's another conversation for another time. But these races coming up in July, August, and then the general election in November, it's going to set the tone. State-wise, obviously, it's going to set the tone for how things progress in Tennessee. Nationally, shit, that just seems like I don't have the energy to think about that yet. We still got a few months. Like I got to get through this primary season, and then we can look at the general. I have been so hyper focused on local and state level politics for the last 4 years, honestly, that I'm dipping my toe back in to the national scene.
It's a great time.
And, man,
it's a great time. I'll tell you that.
It's the worst time. You kidding? The only thing I like about it is I get to watch Jon Stewart every Monday night again.
And you're welcome.
Yeah.
I mean, without this national scene, he wouldn't be back.
He do what?
Without this national scene, he would not be back. Had it not been the dumpster fire that it is, he wasn't coming back.
He never should have left. Left. Look, Chuck, well, you're a bona fide Republican, so I was going to ask, are you going to vote in the primary, District 73? Of course you are.
I am a bona fide Republican. I have asked the local leadership to unbonify me because I do think if they try to arrest me, I've already talked to my lawyer, who's a criminal defense lawyer. I've already talked to him and said, if I get arrested, I've only voted at one primary. And that was just a few months ago. I'm not a big primary voter. I just vote in the general, like whatever the hell y'all want to do. I've really changed over the past 18 months. So I've asked to be unbonafide. I'm telling everybody to vote. If you're listening in Tennessee, vote in whatever primary you want to vote in. Literally. If you're in District 73, vote in the primary because it's the only choice you're going to have. If I were to get arrested for that, I would be okay with that. I would fight those charges because we are an open primary state. I've talked to enough lawyers who feel this way. These are not enforceable. Now, you get arrested for anything. I think it would be good for the show because I think we can sell T-shirts with my mugshot on it. So that is my hope.
Well, we'll see what happens because there is a good chance that somebody might be getting arrested in the next few months.
And when you vote, at least let me come with you so I can record for the site Gabe getting arrested. I mean, you would do that,
Facebook
right?
Live that.
No, yes, we'll definitely. We'll put that on Facebook.
Although I don't know that we can. I probably can't carry a camera into the.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'll let you vote first. I'll stand outside. The cops, now they may waterboard you in there, but they'll have to bring you out at some point, and that's the footage we'll use is when you get brought out in cuffs.
I wonder who handles the security there. Ricky Brown. Like the average age of all those pollsters is about 83.
Still whoop your ass.
They probably could. You're right. Look, dude, I always enjoy it. Next week, we're talking open primaries. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we get John Updike on here, so he can actually give us some very good information about this stuff.
Big things coming. Check us out on YouTube at Walker Talks Radio. Soon becoming WalkerTalksRadio.com. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Walker Talks Radio.
See y'all next week.